All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Lex Gingerella with Recruiting Daily. Thanks for coming back and joining us for our webinar this afternoon to talk about the 11 habits of highly successful recruiters. Bum, bum, bum. The plan today, per usual, housekeeping mode. You are in listening mode, meaning you can hear us, we can't hear you. So what we encourage you to do is please utilize your control panel to ask questions throughout the webinar. Interact with us. In a minute, I'm going to tell you who the presenter is. One of the nicest guys I've ever had the pleasure of working with. We don't bite, neither does he. Take some notes, ask questions, and interact with us. We're pretty fun most of the time. Want a special shout out to today's sponsor, Glassdoor, for making everything possible. Later, when you get a copy of the presentation, there is a special link that will be included with some awesome stuff for Glassdoor. So please stay tuned after the webinar for the follow-up email from us. That way you can check out all of the awesome stuff that they have to offer. If you're not familiar with Glassdoor, get on it. You're in the wrong industry. All right, today's agenda, we're going to talk about what the 11 habits are, what tools are going to be discussed, and how do you get started with these habits. And I don't know who better to talk to than my buddy Brian Fink, who is going to be today's presenter and expert extraordinaire. Brian, I'm going to throw it to you. I want you to talk about yourself, let everybody see and hear how awesome you are, and then I'll just start getting through these slides and we'll learn all these people some real good stuff. Here we go.
Awesome. That sounds like a plan. Thanks for the great introduction, Lex. My name is Brian Fink. I am the lead talent acquisition recruiter for technology talent with RentPath here in Atlanta, Georgia. If you're not familiar with RentPath, we own Apartment Guides, Lovely, Rent, and Rent.com. And I'm seized and charged with finding all of the great technical talent for our organization. So that's everything from junior developers up to data scientists. One thing that I will note is that I'm traveling with the team at Recruiting Daily to our HRTX meetups throughout the country. Our next one is in Chicago on September 6th, and I would love to meet with you in person there. I think as a few people who are on the call can testify, I like to think that I'm a highly accessible recruiter. That's why maybe part of today's conversation will really revolve around time management. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them here, or feel free to find me on Facebook and shoot me a message via Facebook Messenger. Lex can tell you that that's probably the fastest, easiest way to get a hold of me. And my wife made me stop giving out my phone number because people were texting me at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was not down with that. So without any further ado, we're going to jump into the 11 habits of highly successful recruiters. So what are these 11 habits? To kind of give you an overview, we're going to talk about frogs. We're going to talk about momentum, batching, maker versus manager. I know that there are a number of people who are on the call who wear multiple hats. They're team leads. They're responsible for 2 to 3 recruiters, or they may be responsible for an entire recruiting team. So I want to make sure we address that. The Pomodoro technique and how I use that to fast track sourcing every single day of the week. Tackling the manager meeting. You know, as I was putting the slide deck together, I realized that this is really an important habit for, well, I knew it was an important habit for recruiters, and if Ryan and Lex will have me back on sometime in the future, we can really get into tackling the manager meeting, creating scorecards and the like. But today we'll give a small sample of some of the things that I use in my manager meetings one-on-one to make sure that I understand the role and that I'm not starting from Nowheresville, because we know that resumes from Nowheresville end up in the garbage. Then I want to jump into automated alerts so that you can automate your search habits. This would not be a Brian Fink webinar, Brian Fink seminar if I didn't mention Evernote. I am not paid to mention Evernote. However, I've fallen in love with it and believe it is the ultimate CRM tool for recruiting. And I did say CRM. 2-minute drill, what's important in the first 2 minutes of the conversation that takes place with any candidate. Number 10, literacy. I want to make sure that you are able to be 1.5 times more empathetic and have 1.5 times more know-how than your candidates when you get on the call. And finally, follow-up Fridays, making sure that nothing fell through the crack. So I mentioned tools, or I should say Lex mentioned tools. I want to go to the next slide and kind of talk about some tools that might come up in conversation today. Those tools are going to include Momentum, which is a simple Chrome extension. It helps me set my agenda and ultimately eat my first frog of the day. Evernote, again, another free app. YouTube, yep. We're going to talk about how you can use YouTube to really increase the empathy that you have with your candidates. Trello, how you can motivate your hiring managers to really give you that real-time feedback. And then finally, I've also included a link to a Pomodoro timer. In addition to these little goodies, there will be links on some slides that'll be to handouts or to workbooks that you can also use to kind of specialize on the skill. So without any further ado, let's get into frogs. Real quick, the graphic here, I do have to explain it and give some credit to Matt Groening. I'm a big Simpsons Futurama fan, and all my presentations have it in there. But what I want to talk to you about today, the first habit is isolating what is the most important part of your day. What is it that you've really got to get right? Mark Twain originated one of the most famous sayings on productivity tricks when he said, eat a live frog first every morning and nothing worse will happen to you the rest of the day. Now, I didn't learn that from Mark Twain. In fact, I picked that up from Brian Tracy, fleshed it out in a book called Eat the Frog. The idea is simple. It's the idea that you should tackle your biggest task first thing every day. This is typically the task that you're going to procrastinate on the most unless you prioritize it to completion. So by completing it first every morning, you'll feel more accomplished and productive before you finish your morning coffee. That's a win-win, right? Okay, I promise I won't use win-win or synergistic or any of the other 11 words that appear in the original 11 habits. But the reality of it is that if you've got a big project before your first meeting in the morning, or before you meet with a hiring manager, when's the best time to take care of that? Also, if you have to break away from a productivity streak, it's going to take you nearly 30 minutes to get refocused. So the next time you eat the frog, I want you to consider eating the right frog, which is when you decide which frog you're going to eat first. Take some cues from Goldilocks because there's a size to each frog. Once you found the frog that is just the right size, slot the frog into the first time slot that you have available in your day and eat it. For those of us who just joined us, I am not talking about eating amphibians. I'm talking about your to-do list. And really, with that to-do list, you need to identify every day your most important tasks, how long it will take you to complete them, and next look at your calendar and divvy up your task into available time blocks. For example, if you know that candidate research is going to take 3 hours to complete, schedule that task first thing during a morning or afternoon when you don't have back-to-back meetings, when you don't have calls. By eating the right frogs, based on that time available, you'll have time to really kind of clean your plate and to make sure that you're moving forward with those activities that are really pertinent, that are really going to bring the greatest value to you. And at the bottom of this screen, if you'll notice, there is a web upload of Eat That Frog, and it's 30 ways that you can eat the frog and maximize your schedule. That's a little takeaway if you want to kind of drop into that. Next, I want to kind of tackle 3 subjects at once: momentum, batching, and maker versus manager. Momentum is an application that's free, and it occurs, you can download it from Chrome. It occurs every time that you open up a new tab. So when you register with it, it asks you for your name, and it also says, what do you want to accomplish today? And typically I write down first thing in the morning, the biggest objective of the day, that frog that I have to eat on that line that appears right underneath my name. So I know that today, every time I look at something else, if I'm not working on cutting away the fat, if you will, if I'm not jumping into that one particular task, I'm not prioritized, I'm not focused. There's some things that are more important to me. Batching, I kind of alluded to when I was talking about time management just a second ago. It's a popular productivity technique that you put like-minded tasks together in order to tackle more initiatives. For instance, I wear a lot of different hats, and I'm trying to figure out how it is that I can finish them. For many people, including the productivity powerhouse Tim Ferriss, who has a podcast on all things productivity, I batch my emails so that I can respond to a bulk of them only in the morning and in the afternoon. That way I'm not constantly going back and forth to my emails. This kind of a batching method prevents context switching, which I already talked about, the habit of jumping between various unrelated tasks, because I don't need a productivity killer. This practice is also applied to meetings when you add them in a chunk of time on schedule. However, with this system, it's almost too common to suffer the buffer time or 15 to 30-minute gaps in between meetings to kind of give yourself a break or a couple of minutes to tackle menial tasks like responding to more emails. But all of these meetings necessary. And I think that by putting your meetings together, you're able to look at your meetings and really say, which of these meetings require to be meetings, which ones of these meetings are emails, and which one of these meetings are text messages or Slack messages. According to a study by Altician, employees reported spending 31 hours per month in unproductive meetings. I, for one, hate meetings. I find that meetings can really eat up my day. They really produce a lot of unproductive hours. You're wasting up to 25% of your time by buffering time between those 30-minute meetings. So instead of batching your meetings and adding buffer time in between them, consider tweaking the strategy by stacking your meetings instead. Also consider reaching out to people and asking the question, is this really something that we need to have a meeting for? And if it is, make sure you're scheduling those meetings back to back. Also, by scheduling those meetings back to back, you can prevent meetings from drifting over their allotted time, and you can be more strategic in the meetings that you choose to attend as opposed to the meetings that other people choose for you to attend for them. Another great tweak to this productivity hack is to identify your most productive hours and then schedule your meetings during the morning or day that you prefer, that brainstorming, that strategization, or even really that socialization that goes along with meetings. Other hours of your day clearly can be dedicated to executing on other recruiting agendas other than meeting with hiring managers or possibly meeting with candidates. The last part, though, that I want to tackle here is specifically for those individuals who are in a player coach role. It takes a little bit of time to identify what your most productive hours of the day can be. You start structuring them, you want to be hyper productive. That's why we all carry our calendar. A common productivity hack is to organize your week with maker days and manager days. The way that I do this is I follow something called the maker versus manager method, which allows me to designate certain days of the week to focus on manager tasks like coordinating projects, working on candidate outreach, what our candidate focusing website's going to be, meeting with different members of my team, and reporting on my goals. And then you have your maker tasks, which are reaching out to candidates, getting on LinkedIn. I'm going to say that, getting on LinkedIn and sourcing individuals, writing email messages, creating blog posts, maybe designing a new way to reach out to a candidate, like I'm experimenting around with using Venmo to extract email addresses, and we can talk about that later. An example of this might be to schedule, for instance, Tuesdays and Thursdays as maker days, days where you're going to work on quote unquote your work, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as manager days when you're going to help other members of your team. This allows everyone to align their calendars with the type of work that they need to focus on and be complete. By setting clear boundaries, you know that you have at least 2 days each week to kind of work on your core tasks and to make sure that you're dedicated to deep work. Now, of course, the entire batching of days is commonly accomplished only in an ideal world. I'm not being idealistic, where in reality, it's really common for days to get cluttered with high priority deadlines and ad hoc meetings. Again, I hate meetings. So as much as you try to be disciplined, you may find that meetings start to fill up your maker days and that you're breaking this rule more often than not. One way that I found to reorganize my workday is to build my schedule with maker versus manager hours instead of days. With this particular trick, I no longer have specific days in which I have to focus on specific aspects of my role. Instead, I can block off certain hours of each day to accommodate my maker tasks and my manager tasks. For example, you can block off a few hours every morning or afternoon for open office hours. We commonly do this on Wednesday, and we have a coffee talk and kind of a round table. This will be a chunk of time in which anyone can schedule a meeting with you, stop by your desk, ping you on Slack, or just chat, strategize, or just ask questions. The other hours of your day, especially when you feel most focused for that deep work session, can really be dedicated to your maker task. And scheduling maker tasks and maker time on your calendar every day will be significant as to the way you can help your team also accomplish their heads down goals. And real quick, the person I want to give a shout out to is Jeff Audette, who a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, he was the one who introduced me to this method when he saw that I was kind of struggling as both a new manager, a manager and a full desk recruiter. So next, let me move on to what could possibly be another way for you to manage your time. There's something called the Pomodoro technique, and I use this primarily for sourcing. It's a time measurement technique where you can set a timer for about 25 minutes, and you power as hard as you possibly can in that 25 minutes to accomplish that task. So specifically, as many roles as I'm typically working on, anywhere from about 19 to right now, I'm juggling about 23 roles. What I'll do is I'll set the timer for 25 minutes and I'll use these as 25-minute sourcing sprints. I'll put on my Spotify, some high energy music, and just go as hard as I can for 25 minutes and break this down into small intervals so that I can compact and truncate the day so that I've got that particular mission. The reason why you want to break this up into 25 minutes is so that your attention span doesn't lapse. At the end of 25 minutes, I get up, I go, I take a walk around the office, and I come back. I make sure that I've kind of built in another 5 to 6 minutes so that I can have a little bit of quote unquote relaxation. And that's the Pomodoro technique, and that is how I use that for my sourcing sprints. Next technique, which is has a little, oops, let me move to the next slide. Sorry about that. Is tackling the manager meeting. So this is something that I think I probably could have spent an entire breadth of the conversation on, but I think it's no surefire way to waste your time than to forego the meeting with the manager or not to have a deep dive with the manager about what they're looking for. You specifically want to understand what kind of tasks or what kind of goals this person's going to accomplish. So during the kickoff meeting, you're going to get the job description, but what are their target companies that the hiring manager is looking at? Is there anywhere that he thinks does a really good job of what they're looking to place on the team? For instance, art can be pretty subjective, and when I'm working with somebody on a UX role, typically I ask the hiring manager, hey, would you mind giving me an example of a website that you think has really good usability? And I typically go to that website or any other websites that they've noticed that have good UX, and that's where I try to extract individuals from. Key requirements, again, what's required for this job, to the 3 baseline things that somebody needs to know to be able to do this job effectively. And then email templates. I ask my managers, what would you say if you were going to reach out to a prospective candidate? What is it that would catch your attention? So I'm working with them to, one, have them craft my initial outreach message and what that's going to look like, going back and helping them flesh out some additional details with that. That's right, I said that I'm having them write the initial email outreach template to outline the duties and responsibilities of that particular role, and then so that I've got those selling points directly from the hiring manager to the recruiter. At that point, I gather any information that I feel will make my search easier, and I make sure to ask the right questions. Questions I'm asking is, what information will lead me to get to these candidates? Is there a specific time of day that you should be reaching out to developers? Is there a specific time, is there a specific message that they want to hear? Are they looking for, or are they looking for me to give them a link to our Git repository and show what kind of problems we're looking for? What companies are hiring similar people to what we are interested in? Looking at companies that have the same or similar skill set to what we're hiring for really helps there. Which companies share your hiring bar? If you're at an organization like, let's say, LinkedIn, you're probably not hiring the same grade of talent as a 12-person startup that's in Michigan. I don't know. The Michigan hiring manager or founder of that company may have a specific hiring bar, and you want to make sure that you're hitting that hiring bar by bringing back candidates that are going to succeed. That hiring bar may also include candidates that specifically come from specific schools, specific companies, have a specific degree or background. Namely, I hear all the time from my hiring managers, whether it's here at RentPath or it's been at other organizations, we only want candidates from top 25 CS schools. I guess maybe that's another effective habit that if I could have included was a list of the top 25 CS schools. Which startups have quality products in a similar space? What experiences are essential and which ones are optional? I think this is a big question because you really need to dial down about what this candidate or what this person is going to do when they're in the role. And I made the comment before about cutting away the fat. We're only looking for the lean muscle here. So we want to make sure what strengths this team has that other products do or do not so that we can attract another strong muscle to the organization. I've already covered, is education important to the team? Ask the sourcing team what questions they're asking their respective hiring managers. Sourcing can sometimes be split up between, and it may not be full life cycle recruiting. You may want to find out from the sourcing team if they've got a different set of questions that they're asking as opposed to what you're asking. And those are just a few tips on how you can tackle the manager meeting. Automated alerts. This is usually when I'm in a group and I say, show of hands, who here has Gmail? So even if you don't have Gmail and you're probably using Google, once you complete a search, there's an option on the screen for you to complete an automated alert. So I would say if you're constantly looking for React engineers, and I'm looking for React engineers every day, I'm saving my search string and I'm having Google go out and run that each day and bring me back at least once a day the results that are only the best results of people that have resumes that have recently been posted to the web, that have React mentioned, and also have Redux. Next. All right, here comes Evernote. I mentioned that Evernote is an awesome CMS. It is an awesome CRM. It is an awesome ATS. The reason that I say that is you can put almost anything and everything inside of Evernote and it's searchable. So if you were to drop a resume into Evernote, it doesn't parse, but it's searchable in that plain text. If you make a note on that resume or a note about the candidate, that information is searchable. If I'm going to a hiring meeting, I always ask the hiring manager, listen, I'm good at taking notes, and I'm good at listening, but I'm even better if I have a recording. Would you mind if I recorded our session so I can go back and have those notes? I can attach all of this information together and kind of link it together through different notebooks so that I have the hiring manager's voice, the job description, possible candidates, and resume fit. I talk about resume fit. There are two applications on the market which can search that are not designed to do this, but for some reason can, that are designed to take a resume or document and search the web for that document, one of which is Microsoft Word. If you put a resume in, it'll show you prospective jobs that match that resume. If you put a resume into Evernote, it shows you identical LinkedIn profiles that match that profile or that resume that you put to it. It is one of the few tools that allows you to scrape LinkedIn in a complete setting. It's linkable and it's free, and all the tools that I've mentioned today are free and you can use those readily. So Evernote is definitely a habit that you want to take into consideration. You want to make sure you've got one general repository for all your notes that'll follow you wherever you go in your career with whatever candidates you may or may not take with you. 2-minute drill. Everything you need to know happens with this question. I am strongly aware of the fact that Lou Adler has a question that he says is the best question to ask in an interview. And I'm not here to debate Lou Adler. That's not the purpose of today's webinar. Lou Adler asked the question, can you tell me about the biggest challenge that you faced in your career? And he uses that one question to kind of drive the interview. Instead, I use a different question, is I give the candidate an option at the beginning of our conversation and say, look, we're just getting started here. I've read your LinkedIn profile. I've read your resume. And I don't think that really qualifies me to be your biographer. Do you? That's not the 2-minute question. Usually I get a laugh out of that. And then I say, would you mind giving me a 2-minute overview about you, your career, and what's really important? And what you find there is that you have candidates that either have a moment of self-realization that they don't know who they are beyond their resume, and they're going to read their resume, and there's not a lot of depth to that candidate. Or alternatively, you're going to find a more passive candidate who's going to start talking about things that aren't necessarily on their resume, about things that are really important to them, and highlight those areas. Or similarly, you may have it where somebody gravitates to just one part of their career which was really, really important to them, where they stood out, where they had a leadership role, where they delivered the ball across the goal, where they scored the winning basket, something to that effect. And if you take those 2 minutes to really understand your candidate, you don't have to waste your time necessarily qualifying a candidate that is not a fit for your role or pitching a candidate who's not a fit for your role. So I always use the 2-minute drill on every conversation, because I want the candidate to qualify themselves to make sure that I'm really spending the next 30 to 45 minutes talking to somebody who is interested, educated, and qualified for the role. And that's my 2-minute drill. Literacy. All right. Ryan knows this, and I think Ryan's on the cast today, is that usually I say things that are a little outlandish, and then I go, no, we're going to back it up. So there was an article that appeared in Wire in February 2017 that explained that if you're listening to a book on tape, or if you're watching television, or if you're watching a video, or that you're listening to a speaker, you would retain twice as much, I mean, up to 8 times as much information if you listen to them at 1.5 times the speed at which they're talking. So I guess later go back and listen to this podcast and seminar at 1.5 times the speed. It will also increase your empathy for the speaker and for the audience. So in this instance, you've got the opportunity to increase your empathy, which I think is an important trait as a recruiter, to be empathetic to those candidates that you're speaking to. After all, they face as much rejection as you do when you're asking, are you open to a conversation? And also the intelligible know-how that you can bring to the conversation. By no stretch of the imagination do I know what React and Redux really do, but I have a good understanding because I go out and watch YouTube videos where people are giving demonstrations on how it works. I watch them at 1.5 times their speed, and I adapt to, you adapt very quickly to the speaker and to their voice, and you're able to take notes in a much more compelling fashion. And that's literacy equaling 1.5 times empathy and know-how. And then lastly, Friday, it's kind of a big deal. Friday, I try to make sure that I follow up and catch up all of my ends. As you already picked up from the very first slide that we talked about, Brian Tracy, he writes books on sales success and sales performance. I started as a salesperson, actually selling career fairs of all things. I know there are a few people on the simulcast who think I should just go back and do that. But the reality of it is that I studied a lot of sales literature. And on Friday, there are things that I try to do starting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I try to make sure I'm caught up on all my reports, all my reporting is done, that I've responded to all of my LinkedIn invites, I've responded to all of my personal email, all of the professional requests for expertise that I might receive via LinkedIn messages, that I've followed up with my top prospects. And following up with your top prospects can be as simple as sending a text message to somebody who is your lead candidate for director of product and sending them a text message that says, I hope you have a great weekend. Let's connect on Monday. It can be following up to finding out if there are any questions that they have as they head into the week. It can be following up with them about their offers. It also includes getting ready for the next week. And I think that you're kind of putting the ball on the tee here so that you can really be successful as the week starts, reviewing what your goals are and setting that momentum application that I talked about. You can lay out in advance what goals and objectives you want to knock off. One of the big ones that I'm working on now is I'm trying to breathe and reflect on what it is that I've accomplished. I don't mean for it to sound too California-y, where we were in San Francisco last week, and I was amazed at the fact that they have a yoga studio inside the airport. They actually have 4. I was blown away. But that kind of mindfulness and reflecting on what it is that you accomplished is really fuel for the next week. And then finally, the last part of it is thank you notes. I think that you, as a recruiter, you should be writing thank you notes constantly to your hiring manager, even if it's just just a little blurb on Slack saying, thanks for taking a look at my 5 candidates this week. Really appreciate you getting back to me and giving me feedback on all 5. I think that goes an extra way internally to build credibility, as well as reaching out to those candidates and saying, thank you for making time for a conversation. I hope to have quick feedback for you. And those are my 11 habits of my successful recruiting career.
Yay! Insert applause sound here. Woo! Okay, we've got questions. Ready? Okay, so first question. Do you automate your Friday follow-ups, or do you do it manually? And if you do it manually, why not automate it?
So there's certain tasks that I can automate with inside of Gmail, like having email templates that just go ahead and load, or having a certain timer that goes off with Zapier that at 8 a.m. I'm going to send out messages to people saying, thank you, I hope you have a great weekend. But there's some activities that, like going in and picking and choosing who I'm going to admit to my LinkedIn network or become a Facebook friend with, that I can't automate and I won't automate.
Hold on. Stefano.
Oh wait, I mentioned Zapier. You could also use if this then that. For instance, anytime I gain a follower on Twitter, there's a message that goes out to the follower on Twitter automatically that says, thanks for the follow. If you want, we can connect on LinkedIn or we can connect on Facebook.
Oh, cool. Stefano said he's
Hey, buddy, what's up?
Yeah, he thought Bruce Willis was going to be here. He's upset. Okay, John is asking you if you could talk a little bit more about the Evernote app that found other LinkedIn profiles that matched the profile of the resume.
Sure. So Evernote has a tool that's called Context, and Evernote Context was, I feel that Evernote Context was rolled out probably maybe about 4 years ago. And so what Evernote Context does is it takes notes from your account, and even as you type, Evernote searches through your existing notes, the notes your coworkers may have shared with you if you have paid LinkedIn, or it'll also look, and if you've connected your LinkedIn to Evernote, it'll look through that as you're typing. So for instance, like I save all my search strings to Evernote. So when I go and pull up a search string, it automatically starts at the bottom of the screen, bringing me information about people that are either in my network or are third connections. If you include the name of a person in a note, it works really, really well, especially if you're connected with them on LinkedIn. Context will bring up their LinkedIn profile. Also, it will bring back articles from trusted news sources. And when I say trusted news sources, I'm talking about the Wall Street Journal, Crunchbase, Inc. Magazine, Fast Company, the Wall Street Journal. Those are the types of resources that I'm talking about.
Boom, love that. I was taking some notes because I was like, oh God, he's talking fast, but I need to know. Have you ever tried using Microsoft OneNote instead of Evernote?
My wife asks me this question all the time. I've never used OneNote. I started using Evernote back in 2010, and I haven't looked back.
Cool. Let me see what else we got in here. What questions are you seeking to answer when you first start your quote candidate research? Josh is asking.
I'm looking. Well, so first off, candidate research, to me, it depends on what the search is and also what the skill set might be. So for candidate research, I'm doing a little bit of digging particularly inside of, why can't I think of GitHub or Stack Overflow. It's that critical information that I really think that I need to kind of find out there. It also is really identifying the expectations of your hiring manager, knowing the difference between what they want and what they'd like to have, so that you're really kind of zeroing in and knowing the demographics of the recruiting targets. You know, typically what kind of demographic information best describes those in the categories of prospects. By demographics, I'm talking about years of experience, company profile, bringing to the hiring managers companies that they may or may not be aware of that operate in the same field, that have similar tech stacks. I think that other information that you seek out that is often absent when selecting a prospect is their current income or zip code. However, I think that we're getting better with some of our income tools by looking at certain markets and we have a number of income tools now. We can use Glassdoor, we can use LinkedIn. So I think that there are a variety of different ways that you can do the research that you need to do, but I think it comes down to likes and needs of the hiring manager before you ever get started. Is that helpful?
I think so. Also, yes, Josh said yes in all caps. And also, Alan Flair just wanted to point out that you have got to try OneNote on an iPad. So just note that for yourself. Christina, OneNote on an iPad.
Got it. Okay, I've written it down.
Christina Martins is wanting you to, what's the 2-minute drill question? Go back to that a bit. Yeah, you're welcome.
2 minutes. So Christina, I really wish you could kind of role play with me on the call, but I'm going to role play with Lex for a second here. Is that I say, hey, Lex, thanks for making time for me today. I really appreciate it. To get our conversation started, I've read over your LinkedIn profile and I've read over your resume. And I think I know enough maybe to write a really bad biography about you, but I was wondering, would you give me a 2-minute snapshot about who you are, what you're about, and what's most important about you?
Oh, okay, so that makes sense. And then I would be like, why are you making me answer all these questions? I already uploaded my resume.
Exactly, but
Devil's
here's the
advocate. No, I have to.
but here's the art of that, right? Is that I say what's important to you. Is that what might be important to you is that you might be I may have picked on you to be a data engineer, but what's important to you is that you move in the next role that you move into is a vehicle that takes you to being a data scientist. And that immediately qualifies you as either a terminal individual contributor that I am or I'm not looking for, or somebody that I can say, you know what, that's great to know. This role is actually open because we promoted from a data engineer into a data science role. Can I share with you a little bit about what we're doing at RentPath and how we're growing our teams and our skill sets?
Awesome. And Howard actually just asked if we were going to share this. Yes, we will, just so everyone knows that within about 24 hours or so, we'll make sure that everybody that's registered today does get a copy of today's webinar as well as the presentation. And any questions we don't get to, I will make sure I let Brian know personally so he can reach out to you. He's really great at that. So let's see, we've got a couple more questions that come in. So we know that you did talk about alerts, but can you give us maybe some more tools that you're using for them?
Yeah, so I primarily when I talk about alerts, I really like to run on Google Alerts, and the reason that I do that is that Google Alerts just seems to be the easiest way for me to keep control of it, because it lets me know like what content has been changed, what direction that content's going at. It even lets me know if that content is trending, right? Ultimately, if I'm not using Google Alerts, I'm using something like alerts inside of Exalead. So that would be exalead.com/search. I'm using that, but I'm not using any of the meta search engines because I think that sometimes I'm a simple guy, they can overwhelm me.
Okay, you cracked me up. All right, let's see. All righty. What are your thoughts on recording the intake session with the hiring manager via video and sharing with the candidate as part of the prepping process?
Ooh, I've never done that. If I was in an agency, I would think that that would be like the best because they would be able to become a little more familiar, a little more comfortable with the hiring manager. I don't know how I feel about that for corporate recruiting. I'd have to ask my team here at RentPath and say, hey, how would you feel about recording the session and sharing it with them so that they can have a successful interview? I don't see where that would be a problem, but yeah, that's a new one. I like that. Thank you for that takeaway. I appreciate it.
All right. I'll tell you who you can blame for that later. Okay. Josh wants to know, how do you find time to pipeline and recruit proactively versus reactively as needs of the business
So I actually start by looking at what the reoccurring needs of the business are. So say for instance, React engineers. Alexa's heard me, Ted, if Ted's on the call, Ted's heard me complain about it, so is Ryan, is that we're looking for roughly about 9 React engineers every quarter. So I can't be reactive, I have to be proactive and make sure that I'm having those ongoing conversations. So I'm constantly engaged in finding those candidates and engaged in reach out. That's part one. Part two, I really have a passion for data science. I love data science. I enjoy finding the new and different interesting ways that AI is being used. So I make it a point to actually attend local and national artificial intelligence meetups and say, look, I'm a recruiter. I'm not here to plug you my opportunity. I'm here to learn about your community. I'm interested. These are the things that I'm interested in. And they'll be like, oh, let me introduce you to this person over here. That to me is a form of proactive networking that can't really be automated. That's something that has to be done in person. I am constantly reaching out to second connections on LinkedIn that are data scientists and reaching out to them like probably, I'd say maybe about 100 to 200 each week of individuals that have 3 to 5 years of experience that have published some kind of work. That work I'm usually finding through Scholarly, that's scholar.ly, or I'm looking for them on Kaggle.
occur?
And then the last part is helping recruiters get into their next position. I probably should turn that into a business at some point, but I love going out and meeting with other recruiters and doing just like this type of activity and really trying to enrich the business and add some value to other individuals. So that's a bit about how I automate it and about how I act like a Neanderthal and walk up to people and shake hands.
Shaking hands and kissing babies. We're going to jump back a little ways to the very beginning, because my buddy Alan had actually asked a question earlier about how you had mentioned, you said you do, when you find something, you do it once a day. If it's a hot skill, once a day. He wants to know why only once a day? Like, if you've just given him, he says, haven't you just given me much of the day to get to the person first? You know what I'm asking here?
Would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, so why once, at the very beginning, we talked about the skills and everything. You're talking about your frogs, eating your frogs and lining them up. So why only once a day to line up your skills if it's a hot skill? He wants to know. Haven't you just given him much of the day to get to the first person, or to get to the person first?
So I think about the frog being less of a person and more of a task. So I wouldn't limit it to one person. Like, for instance, if my number one goal for the day is to get 3 candidates in play for lead mobile engineering manager, that doesn't mean that the first 3 people that I talk to, oh my God, I'm done. I've got 3 people and I'm going to submit them. It means that my goal for the day, my overarching agenda, is that I get 3 qualified engineers to my hiring manager, which means that I may have to talk to 10 people to really, it's probably more like 6, that I'm going to talk to about 6 people, and I'm going to pick the top 3 of it. That one activity, that's going to be the frog that I eat first, whether it's 3 people or whether it's 6 people, whether it's one skill set or whether it's 2. But it's going to be my highest priority of the day. It may be scheduling 11 candidates to meet with a hiring manager in Chicago on Friday, which is actually what my frog was today.
It makes me think of Harry Potter and the chocolate frog. Sorry, nerd alert. Okay, what did we? One more question, and then we to talk about Evernote again. Somebody is asking if you could share a little bit more about how the campaigns work with Evernote.
Campaigns. I'm confused. Oh wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I know what they're talking about. So when I'm using Evernote to run campaigns, or run emailing campaigns, I'm connecting it via MailChimp, and I'm setting a tag for each individual that's going to be part of that campaign to be able to run through Zapier. That's really something I'd have to show you how to do.
I guess that just means we have to have another webinar where you show us your screen and you, quote unquote, Dean DaCosta us and show us how things are done.
I will DaCosta you, yes.
DaCosta us, awesome. Well, Ryan, I think that was really awesome. Glad we can get a teeny little bit of time back in our day, so that's cool. You're amazing. This is great. You said this was your first webinar?
Yeah, this is my first webinar. Actually, you know what? Real quick, can I give a shout out to somebody?
Yeah.
You just mentioned Dean, and Dean just finished this awesome book that talks about all the pitfalls of recruiting. It isn't just a book about tools, but it talks about the pitfalls, the successes, really what you need to do to be a successful recruiter. Dean has not paid me or Recruiting Daily to talk about this book, but if you don't have this book yet, it's totally worth the money. You should totally take a few minutes just to get it. It is a quick read, and it will open up your eyes and remind you of things that you used to do that you're not doing anymore, or it'll point you to making some of the mundane some of the mundane processes that you could automate that much more lively. Just throwing that out there for Dean.
That was really nice. Awesome. And also, we actually are going to be doing a webinar with Dean coming up on September 7th. It's the Friday after Labor Day. And we're going to be doing another live tools review. So head on over to recruitingwebinars.com and check out the upcoming webinars tab, because you can see what's going on in the future with us. And thanks, Christina. That was awesome. I want to say shout out to everybody that interacted and asked questions today. Christina Martins just said that this is the best recruiting webinar that she's ever attended, so she's my new favorite person. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Brian, so much. You were awesome. Thanks everybody for joining in. We've got some more webinars coming up, so get online, sign up, and we'll see you soon. Thanks everybody, and have a wonderful Tuesday.